You're going to recognize the presenter today because he's been a moderator for several of the programs, and he's taken over for me for the next couple of weeks. Ron Randall is a retired professor of political science and public administration at UT. He is the founding director of the UT Urban Affairs Center, which he directed for nearly 20 years. His research specialties include federal urban policy and local economic development. He holds his BA from the University of Montana and his PhD from the University of Wisconsin. His articles have appeared in numerous professional journals and have been reprinted in books and newspapers. Over the years, he has contributed several opinion pieces to the Blade. Does that mean letters to the editor? In seeking different cultural and political experiences, Ron and his family enjoy traveling to parts of the world less visited by tourists, such as his trips to Turkey. This is Turkey Through the Ages. Ron Randall, take it away.
Thank you, Rose. And hello, everybody.
Hello.
It's good to be here. I guess you can hear me. We took this trip to Turkey with Friendship Force, an organization that was inspired by Jimmy Carter. It has clubs throughout the world, and the idea is that one club will visit another club, will be hosted by another club, and it's a way for people from different cultures to get to know each other, to know each other's cultures, and maybe even to bring a little bit more peace and harmony in the world. More about that when we get to Bursa. We'll be starting out in Istanbul. And I think it's now time to start talking Turkey. Go ahead and say, ooh. Notice the spelling of Turkey. After 100 years, and maybe because of bad puns like that, the United States State Department accepted the Turkish spelling of Turkey. And so we now have an extra letter and an umlaut in Turkey. And you might start seeing more of this spelling in newspapers or in some magazines and journals, I'm not sure, but in all State Department matters, it will be spelled Turkey. Pronounced the same way for us. But,
Good.
now I can't see. We're in Istanbul. Istanbul sits on the continents of Asia and Europe. And we're looking at the Galata Bridge, which makes short work of the trip from Europe to Asia or back. Istanbul, as Byzantium, goes back to about the 7th century before the Common Era. And in 330, Constantine came to Byzantium, becomes Constantinople. And that's the Byzantine Empire that lasted over 1,000 years. And in 1453, the Ottomans, after many years of trying, finally took Istanbul, took Constantinople, and it becomes Istanbul. And that was the seat then of the Ottoman Empire from 1453 until the end of World War II. And this is really one of the great empires of all time. At its maximum, the Ottoman Empire stretched up well into Europe, past Bulgaria and the Balkans, even as far as Crimea, and then wrapped around the Middle East as far down as Mecca, and then along the northern coast of Africa. So it was one of the great empires of all time. And I try to remember from my Western civilization course as a freshman in college, I didn't hear much about the Ottoman Empire. And yet, it was one of the great, not just Asian empires, but European empires. So we'll be seeing more of the Ottoman Empire as we go along. We'll start at the Hajj Sophia, probably the most visited tourist attraction in all of Istanbul. And here we have a view of it from the Bosphorus, and then from a different angle. The Hajj Sophia starts out as a Catholic church with Constantine. And it went through about 3 different structures, and the one that exists today dates back to about 1550, somewhere in that neighborhood. It starts out as a Catholic church. When the Ottomans took over, they put up a couple of minarets, 3 or 4 minarets, and made a mosque out of it. And when Ataturk became the head of the modern Turkey, the Turkey after World War I, in his efforts to at secularization of the whole country, he made, in 1935, the Hajj into a museum. And it was a museum for many years, until 2020, just a couple of years ago, when the current president, about whom I will be saying mostly nasty things, decided that it should be a mosque again. And he changed it back. This, of course, is Recep Tayyip Erdogan. And he's been in power now for probably close to 20 years. And he is an authoritarian, no question about that. And he's trying to overturn just about everything that Ataturk, really the father of modern Turkey, tried to do as far as making Turkey into a more secular, westernized country. They say that Erdogan even sent his daughters to the University of Indiana here in the United States because there they wouldn't have to wear a headscarf. At any university in Turkey, from Ataturk to the present, no headscarves at universities. Well, the present building really dates, it's the 3rd incarnation of the Hajj, and it dates back to about 530 or 550, somewhere in that neighborhood. And here's an architrave from the 2nd building. An architrave is a stone that goes across pillars, provides part of the roof of the building. And you see 6 sheep there. There's another one someplace, I didn't see it, with another 6 sheep. Those represent the 12 apostles. Clearly a Christian church, which it is not today. Here's a shot which I stole from the internet before it became a mosque again, while it was still a museum. Looking down on the prayer area, no rug to lean on, to get down on for your prayer. And it's just a wonderful structure. And here is a dome, and here you see, now this is a dome that I stole from the picture of a dome that I stole from the internet because I wanted something before 2020. And here, who do you see? The Virgin Mary and the Christ Child. Same dome over here. What do you see? White curtains. Now, anybody who goes to the Hajj knows a little bit about this, has to start looking for that picture of the Virgin Mary. And I looked and looked and looked and couldn't see anything, so I took the picture of the curtains. Then I started playing with this picture on my computer at home, and are you close enough to see?
Yeah.
Peeking through the curtains? I mean, this becomes a game for tourists. And if you look over here, a little bit of her left arm, of her right arm. So she's there, along with the Christ child, but mostly hidden by curtains. And this is in keeping with the tenets of Islam, that you will not have images like that in a mosque. And I fully understand that, but still I play the gate and look for her. Well, here's the Grand Dome. And I tell you, I'm standing there looking up, and I say, how did they do this in the 500s, in the 6th century? That dome is 150 feet high. How they constructed that then, I don't know, it's pretty impressive. Well, we have to go to the Topkapi Palace, which was the administrative seat of the Ottoman Empire from shortly after 1543 until about the end of the 18th century, when another place became the administrative seat of the empire. And here's where the Sultan lived, where he kept his concubines, where he had his harem. And it's a big place, it's complex, and you'll see our guide here saying, okay, you all go in, and he tells us what to look for, and then we'll meet outside at a restaurant. Once I got in there, it's so complex, I wasn't sure I was going to get out, at least at the right gate, and find the restaurant. Eventually we did, and it all turned out happily ever after. But our guide in the blue hat there said, be sure and see the Topkapi emerald-studded dagger. So we did. This was to be a gift of the Sultan to the Shah of Iran in the 18th century. The problem is that the Shah was executed before the emissary delivered the dagger. So he had to take it back, and it now resides in the museum at the Topkapi grounds. So, and that was actually part of a movie starring Peter Ustinov and Melina McCurry. I haven't seen the movie, but I read about it. And that dagger is central to the movie. So if you ever see the movie, you've now seen the dagger. Well, we have to have a brief stop at the circumcision pavilion. Now, every guy gets a little nervous at this time. And I'm sure that Ahmed I was very nervous because he assumed the throne, the Sultan, when he was 13 years old and hadn't been circumcised. Now, as far as I know, he is the only Sultan to be circumcised while Sultan. And he has a couple of other things in his background that are important too. Prior to Ahmed I, fratricide was normal. A sultan, having just assumed that role, would have assassinated all of his brothers, uncles, and other relatives, so there'd be no other pretenders to the throne, so there'd be no other competition. And if you were a brother of a sultan, you knew what was going to happen, and you just accepted it. But Ahmed I, in about 6, I think he assumes the throne he was born in 1602, so about 1615. He changes this, and he no longer kills all of his brothers, uncles, and other male potential heirs to the throne. And he was killed when he was about 27, and his brother, Mustafa, assumed the throne. And so we moved from fratricide to seniority. Mustafa was the next most senior person, so he got going. So that's the circumcision pavilion. Now, I took this picture mostly because I thought, would this have been the case before Erdogan assumed power and started reversing all that Ataturk had done? I mean, 3 women in full burqas on the grounds of the Topkapi complex. Not sure. We go down to the Hippodrome. The Hippodrome used to be a place that seated 40,000 people who could watch chariot races. I'll get you a chariot in a while. They don't do chariot races anymore, and most of the walls are gone. But it's now a very popular touristy place, and there are a lot of vendors around, and so it's just a fun place to hang out. And here we have the obelisk of Theodosius, a gift of the Pharaoh Thutmose III from Egypt to the Byzantine Empire, given in about 300 BC, 300 in the Common Era, 80. And I have a close-up. This obelisk, when it was given to the Byzantines, was over 2,000 years old. Now it's over 3,000 years old, and it's still in pristine condition. Also on the Hippodrome, I wanted to get a shot of this. This is the column of Constantine, and in 1204, with the Fourth Crusade, well, Istanbul, or Constantinople, was seen as a beautiful city, extremely wealthy, and when the Crusaders came through, they were a little greedy, and they started ripping stuff off this column. So you see the holes that remain? Those holes are there from what secured what was on that column. It's all been removed by the Crusaders in 1204. This is a gift of Kaiser Wilhelm to the Ottoman Empire in about 1902. This is also on the Hippodrome. And as our guide pointed out, as we're looking at this, the Ottoman Empire picked the wrong side for World War I. The Sultan at that time actually had made overtures to France and England. Apparently it was rebuffed, and they'd had long ties, the empire had long ties with Germany, and he sided with Germany, and with the defeat of Germany came the defeat of the Ottoman Empire and the dissolution of the Ottoman Empire, and out of that then came modern-day Turkey, which is just a tiny, tiny remnant of the former Ottoman Empire. This is the Suleymaniye Mosque, dates to about 1550, and Suleiman the Magnificent was really an extraordinary sultan. He presided over the empire at its greatest. He was killed in battle after many years as sultan in Hungary, where he was leading the charges. He had made a couple of efforts to take Vienna. He knocked at the gates, at the walls of Vienna, but actually never got in. But he got some of Hungary. And in his later years, he was a gifted poet, goldsmith. He knew many languages. He was a person that was really very interesting. And that's his mosque, a beautiful, beautiful structure. Here's where you do your ablutions. In Islam, you're to go in to pray with a clean mind, a clean heart, a clean body. And this would be for men. They can wash their hands, their face, and their feet before going in to pray. In most mosques, the place for ablutions was probably a bit more private. There's a legend of Dimitri Baba on his deer with a wooden sword actually helping the Sultan orphan, capture the Bursa area and making Bursa into that first major capital of the Ottoman Empire. And here's that dome that I talked about. We've got over 100,000 people in these pictures, and I tried my camera for a video because one picture just doesn't really capture well. But it's 360 degrees, so you can turn all the way around and just see more and more of Bursa. Up against the top, you see the walls of Bursa, the old wall. And this is what it would look like in 1326. Well, I thought that was pretty neat. Now we're going to take a walking tour of a city that dates back to a part of the Bursa province. Dates back to the 7th century BCE, really. And that's our guide, Ursula. Actually, I should try to get a better picture of her, but that's the best I could do. Some of it has been restored, and some of it is still falling down. As we're walking along, we came upon Jim, G-Y-M, but he preferred J-I-M, who had spent several years living in New York City in the Bronx. And then the pandemic comes along. He loses his H1N1 status because he loses his job, so he has to come back to Turkey. And he just started tagging along with us. And he was talking, and he said, I've got to get back to the United States. He said, there's just so much that's wrong with Turkey. It turned out that every young person that we met in Turkey wanted to get out. I'm looking at a country that looks pretty middle class, but they all wanted to get out. And he said, the inflation is killing me. It's 180% a year. I thought, wow, that's really high. And when I got back to Toledo, got to my computer, I said, I got to fact check that. It wasn't 180%. It was only 80% in the last year. 80% is high. Well, he took us, this is tagging along. He said, you want to see our place? I said, well, sure. So we went up into one of the old apartment buildings. The home has been in the family for 5 generations. And you see a living room. I have a picture here. The parents left a prominently displayed no smoking sign. And Jim apparently couldn't resist. But he was an engaging young guy, and we had fun talking to him. And finally he said, well, that's enough, and he left us. Some olives going to market, some olives ready for market. There's a lot of olives in Turkey. And here's that chariot. And I was so excited. A 2,600-year-old chariot. Could have been racing around the Hippodrome. Except I checked it out on Wikipedia, and it's not 2,600 years old. It's a replica. But it was made from, in the style, from parts that were uncovered during a road construction project not too far away. So it looks like it's 2,600 years old. And that's, can't you just see going around a hippodrome? And we went to the Bursa Scales Museum, which was nearby, and I was really interested in the Scales Museum until, you see it?
An honest weight, no springs.
That's right, say it again.
An honest weight.
An honest weight. And I was, I'm sorry to see Toledo Scales leave Toledo years ago. Well, here we go to a 700-year-old Ottoman village, and you look over here. The people lived up on the second floor, second level, and on the first level were great big doors. You can get your horses, you can get your cart in there. 700 years ago. Today, you still have the big doors, but there are little shops in there. So it's 700-year-old buildings with contemporary stuff to buy. It's a fun place. And here we have a building that looks like it's 700 years old. They haven't restored that one. And three of the women from our group stopping for tea before they trek on through the Wildwood village. We went to Iznik, which used to be Nicaea. In Christian days, the Nicene Creed, the councils, the two councils of Nicaea, but they had earthquakes back then too. And if you're looking for the council, you know, where the Nicene Creed came from, you'll have to look down into about 6 meters of water. And there's the outline of one of the buildings. Now, I wasn't over the water taking that picture. This is actually a picture of a picture. But that's where the Nicene Creed came from. So there's a wonderful history in Turkey. Here we have the walls of Bursa, actually 2 gates here, and on your right, an aqueduct that was actually working in the early 20th century. And it was about a ½ meter by a ½ meter, so it'd be a foot and a half wide and a foot and a half deep. So a lot of water could run through that aqueduct, and it was working into the 20th century. Well, it's time for the farewell dinner. It's time to leave Bursa. There's the engineer that I was talking about. She's the one that said, I'll give you the example. And that would be the example of the Istanbul airport, where all that corruption made Erdogan and his family and friends live. We're on a bus heading off toward Ankara, and there is, on the right is our third guide, Mihat, and we'd hardly gotten on the bus, hardly met Mihat, but he and Jane fell into a discussion about how corrupt Turkey was. And I mean, this is the guy. And he said, Turkey is the second most corrupt country in the world. Well, who's first? He said Mexico. I don't know. But I'll accept his designation of number 2 for Turkey. Well, we went to the Midas. One of our first stops was the Midas Tumulusu. Now, Tumulusu is a burial mound. This one's about 150 feet high, so it's a pretty good sized one. And supposedly, Midas is on the inside. You know, Midas of everything turning to gold? Except, I know for sure that part of Midas is not in here. And you'll see in a minute why. But there's also some dispute, well, maybe it was Midas's father, or maybe Gordius is in there. Gordius of the Gordian knot. You remember him? About 1200. He's a Phrygian, and he secured his cart with this very elaborate knot. And the idea, according to legend, is that anybody who could get that knot untied would rule over all of Asia. Now that's 1200. In 330, the knot's still there. In a little bit before 330, Alexander the Great comes by. He tries. I mean, he wants to rule over all of Asia and everywhere else. And he got frustrated. And so he pulls out his sword and he cuts the knot. That was not a wise thing to do. Less than a year later, he's dead. So we're not sure who's in there. But let's go into the Tolosu, and over on the right, you see that the tomb is actually shored up with some modern steel. Still wondering who's inside. This kind of surprised me. We're so sensitive in this country to, out of Native American concerns, that bones and skeletons not be displayed. And I was really quite surprised that I saw so many bones and skeletons in Turkey. But we're going into the museum. This is the Museum of Anatolian Civilizations. And this is such a wonderful museum that I can't do it justice, but I did bring a book, and there are sections on the Neolithic age, there are sections on the Assyrian age in Turkey, on the Hittite years of Turkey, and on the Pavillion years in Turkey, or what is now Turkey. And this is some arrowheads from a long time ago. Here is a pictograph that is what, from 6000 BC. And just so you know what you're looking at, the museum curators kindly have this drawing up here, so you can now look down at the pictograph, and that's what you see. 6,000 BCE, so that's what, 8,000 years old? Those still pretty good. And a marriage certificate in cuneiform. Now, guys, be careful. This contract is drawn up in the presence of these three witnesses, and this is all in cuneiform. And this guy takes another wife, he'll have to divorce this woman, and he'll have to pay her 5 minas silver. Now, I'm not sure how much that would be, but it sounds like you ought to stick together. Now, this is the skull of Midas. So, and this is in the museum. So, now we're ready for Cappadocia, and everybody who goes to Turkey comes back talking about Cappadocia. This is a strange area geologically. Years and years ago, eons ago, you had volcanoes, but instead of spewing lava, they spewed what's called tuff, which is pulverized minerals and rocks, and spread all over the area. It turns out that some of that tuff is more given to erosion than other parts. And so here we have these columns which didn't erode, but everything around them did. And this tuff then making hillsides allowed for great excavation inside. So whole homes, churches were carved out of the hillsides. And we'll see some of that. Like right now. Here's the Gorham Open Air Museum. This is a church. We're going into the church carved out of a hillside. And during the Roman period, Christians could take refuge in areas like this or in homes in these hillsides. There's another skeleton for you. And here's a picture. These aren't big churches, but here's a picture of St. George with his spear slaying the dragon. And if you go to Cappadocia, you have to go on the balloon ride. So here we are, up early in the morning before sunrise, I mean really early, before breakfast. We got back to our hotel in time for breakfast. And they're have a fan blowing up the balloon, and when they get blown up enough, then they can start putting the flame to it. And notice that the basket is on its side. So eventually the balloon will rise and the basket will be right side up. And then we're off. And it isn't just us going up, it's thousands going up. There are hundreds and hundreds of these balloons that go up every day that's where the weather is suitable in Cappadocia. And they're guided by pilots, and some of them are pretty good pilots, and they give you real good views. Some of these columns that are sticking up came pretty close to them. So we had our ups and downs as we were going along. I was kind of interested in elevation, and I'd say to our pilot, how high are we? He'd say 1,000 meters. And every time I asked him, 1,000 meters. It didn't matter if we were up high or down. It was 1,000 meters. It wasn't 1,000 meters, because that really would have been high. That would have been 1,000. That's what it told me. Now, we came in pretty close. See these homes carved out of the hillside? People still live there. And then some regular homes. And I actually felt sort of like a voyeur, looking in the bedroom windows of all these houses that were going through a balloon. And then we had the celebratory champagne after the successful flight. And I got to thinking, what in the world did all of these people in the tourist business do during the pandemic? I mean, there weren't balloons going up like that, not hundreds and hundreds. And all these tourist towns, all these hotels, all these guides, we saw guides taking 1 or 2 people around at times. So the pandemic just must have been devastating. One of our guides told us that he went 6 months without a job. Well, now we come to the salacious part of the program. And all I can say is, it's not me, it's Mother Nature in kind of a frisky mood. Because these are those columns, everything else erodes away, and that's what's left. And they even take advantage of it and call it Loverly Valley. And you have a picture of Jane and me, a schmaltzy picture of Jane and me, with some of the phallic symbols in the background. Well, now we are heading to Ephesus, and this is a remarkable ruins, Roman ruins mostly, but Ephesus was there much before the Romans. It was a Greek city-state, and others before them. And this is just a street scene from Ephesus. Here we have the Boletarian, and back in the days when it was a Greek city-state, a democratic Greek city-state, the people in the community could sit up in the stands and they could participate in the governance. They also did musicals here, and perhaps in about 35, 33 BC, when Cleopatra and Mark Antony were spending some time in Ephesus, they may have gone to a musical here, to a show. Now, to show that this actually was Greek before it's Roman, mostly you're seeing Roman ruins, but here is Nike, winged Nike, who represents victory in a lot of different areas. Who knows where this was originally located, but now it's just sort of leaning off to the side against a rock wall, and I've got a picture of her. Now, I I was looking around for the restrooms. And luckily, I wasn't in that much of a hurry because I couldn't see any signs that said men or women. But I did see several long slabs, only showing 2 holes here, but several long slabs in this building. And down below you had water that was moving everything out, so it was pretty modern in that sense. But it's a little bit too public for our current sensibilities. And like I say, there was no men's room, no women's room. It was everybody's room. Now we're going to go up into the terrace houses. And this is really an interesting part of Ephesus. I should say that Ephesus has been known to exist in the modern era. It's been known to exist since probably about mid-1800s. But it was Austrians who, around the turn of the 20th century, started excavating. So this is mostly an Austrian undertaking now. And they figure that they have excavated about 15% of the original city. So 85% is left to dig through. And these are the terraced homes. This is all under a ramp or a cover now, and you have to pay extra to go in. I'm really glad I did. And you see these tiles that people are trying to put back together, and on the wall, they'll be put back up on the wall when they get things together. Somebody left a thermos there, so it's a construction site. They are actually working. And here we're up a little higher, and we're looking down on a couple of rooms. I mean, you're getting to see what it was like to live in Ephesus a couple thousand years ago. And they're working on it. The floor has been cleaned up, and the tiles are replaced. On the walls, you have the murals. And here, we go to the amphitheater, where great plays could be performed. And this amphitheater holds 25,000 people. And the rule of thumb is the amphitheater in one of these ancient cities would hold about 10% of the population. So that means that Ephesus probably had 250,000 people. It's no wonder they had that public bathroom. Well, here's the library, and I'll tell a little story here. We were wandering around the library, and all of a sudden, people started screaming out, especially Jane. And she saw a couple, they saw Jane, that we'd stayed with in Mexico on a friendship course. Can you imagine? We're in Ephesus, and we see this couple that we stayed with in Jalapa. And they're screaming, and I'm off looking at something else. And I'm like, why are all those people screaming? And I turn around, and here's this couple. We'd stayed with them 8 or 10 years ago on a friendship course exchange, and we saw them there. Well, this is the library. So in Ephesus, when you want to meet people, you say, I'll meet you at the library. This library had 10,000 or 12,000 scrolls. It rivaled the library in Alexandria. And in fact, there was some story about Alexandria needing more paper papyrus for scrolls, and they could get it from Ephesus, but Ephesus wanted to outdo Alexandria so they wouldn't sell them. There's something like that. So, that stuff goes on. Well, we're going to end here with two goddesses, Aret and Episteme. One on the left, goddess of virtue, the other on the right, the goddess of knowledge. And I thought, well, that's a pretty good place to end a tour of Turkey. Virtue and knowledge. So thank you.
Good job. It's so great to go back in time and see these ruins. It's just such a wonder. Let's take some questions now from the audience. And if we run out of time, you can always come up and talk to Ron.
So, any questions? Yes. Oh, hi. How are you? Good.
I know that Turkey is a member of NATO. How would you characterize their membership in NATO? Are they a good member or not a good member?
I would say the question is NATO. For NATO membership, Turkey is a member of NATO. How would you characterize the relationship? I would say it's very, very awkward. Turkey really upset the United States a few years ago, I think during the Obama years, when they bought some missiles from Russia. And now, of course, Turkey is standing in the way of Swedish membership into NATO. I said that we found no one in Turkey that actually had a good thing to say about Erdogan. I don't think you would find anybody in the State Department that would say a good thing about Erdogan either. So it's kind of a bad relationship.
How does he stay in power?
How does he stay in power? I ask people this. How does Erdogan stay in power? He stays in power by putting his people, his family, his friends in all these positions. Thousands and thousands of his people are in Turkish positions of power. The military is his. I didn't really talk about the construction of those buildings in the earthquake zone, but they have a term called, and this is a Erdogan term, zoning amnesty. Those buildings were built not according to codes that would make them earthquake resistant, but just any other way. And they call it zoning amnesty. And so, of course, when you have a little tremor in the ground, the buildings just come down. You've seen those pieces that are built. And it wasn't necessary that all these people were dead. And he has put his people into the courts, into government positions, into everywhere. And then a lot of rural people who are more religious than the city folks that we were dealing with, like his efforts to reverse Ataturk. He is even, according to one of the people we talked to, he is even taking Ataturk out of the high school history books. And Ataturk is a godlike figure. He's not a perfect person, but he's a godlike figure, like George Washington in the United States. He is the father of modern Turkey, being removed from the history books. Other questions?
The attempted coup that occurred some years back, do you think that was fabricated because it was pretty strange that he got that, put that down?
Well, there was a coup a few years ago, and he's angry with the United States because we will extradite, I forget the name of the person. What? Say it one more time, real loud. Gulen, yeah, who supposedly was behind that attempted coup, and we won't extradite him back to the United States, to Turkey. He lives in Pennsylvania, and we heard a little bit about that. I don't think it was fabricated. I think that there is genuine distress. We met not a single person, not even even the guys were critical of Erdogan. So I think that was a real effort, and it failed because the army was controlled by Randall. Yes?
those people that you're hosting, aren't they a little concerned about offering their opinions about Erdogan?
Are the people that hosted us concerned about speaking out because of Erdogan? There's probably a yes and a no to that. We had one woman who said that she was Kurdish, Turkish, and you know, Erdogan's had this problem with the Kurds. The Kurds have this problem with Erdogan. She said, I would willingly give my life if I could get close enough to him to execute him. I mean, this is a middle-class woman talking to us. She said, but I can't get close to him. He's got all these guards and security around him. We can't get anywhere near him. Now, she said that to us, and I'm telling you, we worked to get back. I think she's safe, but no, people were really quite outspoken. And like I said, all the younger people wanted to get out of Turkey, partly because of the increasing religiosity of the state. It's becoming an authoritarian theocracy. And partly because of that inflation, the 180% per year, which is not quite 180%. And because they don't see the job opportunities. So England, Australia, the United States were real attractive. That Jim that we talked about, he couldn't wait to get back to the United States once a job opened up for him, and he could get a green card. Yes?
How large was the group that you traveled with?
How large was the group that we traveled with? There were about 16.
16?
Yes.
Were they all from the United States, or were they from various countries?
They were all from the United States.
Okay.
And we went with the Kalamazoo Friendship Forest Club, so most of them were from the Kalamazoo area, but we had some Floridians. I think we had one woman from California, and then a few people from Toledo.
Oh, yeah.
Other questions? Yes, Mark?
How is the infrastructure for tourists, and how much did you know about Turkey before you left? Before you went?
The infrastructure and how much did I know about Turkey before I left? Let me take your second question first. I know a whole lot more about Turkey now than before I left. You know, people travel in different ways, and some people do all their research in advance, and I'm not really that good. I did some, and I read, I pay attention to current events, so I knew there was some sensitivity between Turkey and the United States over Sweden. I knew that there was some sensitivity over those missiles that Turkey had purchased earlier, but I did not, I guess I did not know how middle class Turkey appeared to be, and I did not know that Erdogan was such a despised figure. I did know that Erdogan was reversing some of Ataturk's efforts at creating a secular Turkey, but I did not realize the degree to which he was doing that. You know, in 2020, I think I had read that the Hagia Sophia had been turned back into a mosque, but you know, that's sort of in one eye and out the other. Yes?
Was Ataturk's attempt to secularize the country well received with the people there in the sense of preserving whatever they wanted? If they wanted to keep their own traditions, was that okay?
Well, I think so. The question is, what was Ataturk's effort at secularization well received? Like, could people keep their own traditions? And I think so. And I'll say this, going back in time, the Ottoman Empire, until the very latter years, was really open to different religions and different cultures. All of the sultans, well, they had this army called Janissaries, and the members of the army came from different countries. They usually were sort of Shanghai into the Janissary battalions. But but they became loyal Turks. And some of them remained Christians, Jews. Jews were not discriminated at all in most of the years of the Ottoman Empire. So there's that tradition of really being quite open. I mean, the Ottoman Empire was more open to a religiously diverse outlook than a lot of Christian Europe during those years. We don't think of it that way now, but it really was. So I think in that sense, that history, most people were with Ataturk. And certainly the women that we were dealing with did not want to wear headscarves. And one woman said, he'll probably have us wearing headscarves within 10 years. Maybe sooner. So contemporary Turkey, middle-class contemporary Turkey, is not with Erdogan at all. Get into some of the rural, more religious areas, more fundamentalist Islamic areas, there's more support.
Not looking good. Well, thank you so much. If you have another question, he'll stay for
Yeah, I'll stick around.
Yeah.